TSN Week with Alamazur.
So, what's going on with the weapons from the States? Is America supporting us or not? The news that Ukraine's strategic partner, the United States, halted the supply of critically important weapons to us at one of the most difficult moments of the war literally exploded this week in the world press and in the highest offices of many countries. Despite America's official statement about depleting its own arsenals, this decision looks more like a lever of influence on Ukraine. This opinion is voiced, in particular, in the Wall Street Journal. Trump is essentially punishing Ukraine and rewarding Russia. If Russia wins, it will be a failure not of Kiev, but of Washington. This is from an editorial column in the Washington Post. And Trump's favorite newspaper, the New York Post, which he reads every morning, called on the U.S. president at the end of the week to resume all military aid to us, emphasizing that Ukraine's fall will destabilize the world and weaken America. So have all deliveries really been stopped? Who made this decision? Why right now? The debate has been raging all week. One theory is that during a phone conversation on the eve of U.S. Independence Day, Putin finally told Trump, "Yes, I agree to a ceasefire." And on this holiday for Americans, Trump himself could have solemnly declared, "I stopped this war too." But things didn't go as planned. These photos of Kiev engulfed in flames once again made headlines in global media, serving as a demonstration that Putin disregards all of Trump's peace efforts. And the anti-missiles blocked in Poland are also a stain on the White House because 476 drones on Thursday night were either shot down or forced to land. But out of 11 ballistic and cruise missiles, only 2 were shot down, as acknowledged by the Ukrainian Air Force. Well, it seems the old man in the Kremlin miscalculated here, because for the first time during his new term, President Trump stated that he is disappointed in Putin and doesn't see any sign that Putin wants to stop. Will this awakening of Trump have any impact on the course of the war in Ukraine? What did he say to President Zelensky? And what black swans are already looming over Russia? Let's talk further about the dramatic detective story we're living in. This is TSN Week. The more you know, the better armed you are. Greetings to everyone watching us on the YouTube channel as well, and coming up in the broadcast. The invasion of saboteurs and swarms of drones. What tactics is Moscow testing for the attack on Sumy?
Welcome to Ukraine. We're waiting for everyone. We're all here and we're staying.
What weapons are holding back the enemy's advance, while the United States has halted supplies? The dark side of the White House. Who really stopped the supply of weapons to Ukraine? And why could everything suddenly change for the better?
You know, we've talked a lot about sanctions.
Our Black Sea.
How a sunken fleet drove the Russians out of the Black Sea.
We go out to sea together with an elite special unit of the Navy.
What secret combat operations above and deep below the water make the Ukrainian Navy the most dangerous force in the Black Sea. An exclusive from TSN Week aboard the newly received landing craft. How did we eliminate Putin's favorite?
It's a disaster here. Everything's a disaster.
And we've reached arsenals that were never hit before. And why can Russian military factories now be shut down right from Ukraine? A summer of catastrophes. How, against the backdrop of scorching temperatures in the West, Ukraine is becoming a paradise oasis. But first, the front. We have to admit that the summer offensive, which Putin seems to have bet on, is still not going the way he wanted, but it is taking pieces of territory from us. The attempt by Russian occupiers to create a buffer zone in the Sumy region ran into powerful counterattacks by Ukrainian soldiers, but the enemy assaults are not decreasing. Russian troops are already 20 kilometers from Sumy. Our war correspondent Andriy Tsaplienko spoke with our defenders there, and now he'll explain why they are confident that the Muscovites won't be able to capture Sumy. And also, in this episode, we want to help the Rubish Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine. The brigade's tactical groups are also operating in the hottest spots on the front, particularly in the Pokrovsk direction. And to effectively destroy the enemy, they desperately need electronic warfare protection. That's why our 10, 20, or even 100 hryvnias sent via this QR code will protect our soldiers, and therefore, all of us. Thank you.
June has become one of the worst months for Ukrainian defense since the beginning of the year. The Russian strategic offensive continues. According to analysts, over the past month, the Russians have occupied several hundred square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. At the same time, the overall rate of Russian losses is decreasing. And that's bad news, because it means the enemy is adapting to Ukrainian combat tactics. The good news, alongside the lost territories, there are also settlements that have been retaken. The enemy was unable to gain a foothold in Dakhny on the administrative border of Dnipropetrovsk region. And in the Sumy region, the enemy was driven out of Andrivka, where assault troops from the 30th Regiment of the Occupation Army had entered while advancing on Sumy.
We are doing everything possible to prevent the enemy from reaching Sumy.
Ola Shuryev, commander of the 225th Assault Regiment. The unit, which was still a battalion at the time, made a strong name for itself during the Kursk operation. It broke through the front line, advanced forward, took prisoners, and replenished its fleet with captured armored vehicles. The 225th Battalion was transformed into a separate regiment to carry out extremely difficult missions when it was necessary to save the situation and assault a much stronger enemy. In Andrivka, the regiment accomplished its mission.
As a result of the Kursk operation, the enemy was really wiped out. Those units that are now advancing on Sumy.
They were wiped out 4 times. This can be said about the 155th Brigade, the 76th Pskov Division, which is now advancing on Munikivka.
The situation in Andrivka could have become critical for Sumy. The regional center is 20 kilometers away, the range of an artillery shot. A Russian battalion command post had already been set up in the village. Its commander, Andrei Yartsev, was also there. The command post was destroyed, the battalion was cleared out, and according to intelligence, the commander was eliminated. But beyond Andrivka lies another occupied village, Kindratika, from which it's much harder to drive the enemy out.
We completely blocked all routes for the enemy, eliminated their ability to break through into the depths of Sumy region, that is, both in the Andrivka and Kindrativka directions. But unfortunately, before we arrived in this direction, the enemy managed to concentrate in Kindrativka with very large forces, at least 2 battalions. These 2 battalions are already quite worn out. There is panic among the enemy there.
The crew of the Msabi howitzer is covering the Ukrainian riflemen who have approached Kindrativka.
Gun!
Over the course of a day, the gun fires dozens of shells towards the enemy.
No less than 50.
Per gun. Somewhere in the forests, a huge amount of other artillery is well hidden. We don't see it. We only hear how hard the Ukrainian artillery is working in the direction of Kindrativka. The guys are firing at enemy positions beyond the village of Andrivka. This is already Ukrainian territory. They are convinced that the Russians have plans to advance on Sumy.
The enemy is aiming to take Sumy. You can see that, because it's just not realistic. Maybe it will be possible in about 20 years, but definitely not now.
Well, do you think they're ready to fight for 20 years?
Well, I don't know. I was just speaking figuratively when I said 20. But that they're aiming to take Sumy, well, that's for sure.
To prevent this from happening, the regiment launches counterattacks against the enemy. The weather is changing, it starts to rain, and cannons from different positions begin to fire simultaneously at a single point.
The current task is to take aim and support our assault operations. Our task is still to suppress the enemy.
The downpour interferes with the enemy drones, so somewhere behind Andrivka, the regiment makes its way forward.
Gun!
While it's raining, while it's bad weather, the guys are seizing the moment. Our people launched a counterattack, and the artillery of the 225th Regiment supported them. The work of a harpist is difficult and exhausting. How did it work?
Fine, excellent. The gun weighs 7 tons. Well, under the body armor, of course, I got a bit winded.
But it's much harder for the assault troops right now. The wounded from Andrivka are first brought here, to the regimental command post near the front line.
At first glance, it looks like everything is clean here.
Evacuation is always a risk. Drones constantly attack evacuation vehicles. And then the wounded soldiers have to wait until rain and clouds clear the sky of drones. This guy with a wounded arm waited 8 days for his chance.
Shrapnel and bone fragments themselves. They did a transport mobilization, meaning he's being taken to a specialized X-ray facility where his wounds will be treated, and then they'll decide how to fix his humerus. It'll either be a plate or some other kind of fixator.
There's not much space, but everything needed to stabilize the wounded is here. Sometimes, it's these frontline doctors who determine whether an assault trooper has a chance to survive. This fighter's leg was saved from amputation thanks to poor quality first aid at the position. That happens too.
Luckily, the tourniquet was ineffective, so the blood supply to the limb was sufficient. In this case, a poorly applied tourniquet actually worked in his favor.
Can you hear me? Sasha, you're in the hospital. You're surrounded by your own people. Can you hear me?
Here, lying on a bed in the stabilization point, a wounded man is asking to be sent back to the front line to his guys because they won't manage without him.
I shouldn't be here. I should be in Dnipro as an engineer.
He'll manage without me.
It seems the spirit of these people is stronger than their battered bodies.
Our guys are doing great, really giving them a hard time over there. Well, there are 2 or 3 left, maybe hiding somewhere, like swamp frogs, but our guys, they'll get them, the boys will find them.
In the near future, the regiment expects to reduce the number of losses, at least from drones. The commander says that the unit is working on a uniform design with Kevlar and fiber fabric elements. Without affecting the soldiers' mobility, such special clothing should be able to protect him better from shrapnel, Major Shiriev expects. But the enemy in the Sumy direction is also becoming more inventive and dangerous. The 225th Regiment eliminated a sabotage group that had penetrated as far as 5 kilometers beyond the front line. A unique trophy that was captured, a hybrid of Colt and firearms, may indicate the serious training of Russian saboteurs. The regiment commander, who is skilled in knife fighting, admits that he had only read about such a weapon in books.
A knife that shoots. Honestly, this is the first time I've ever seen something like that. It fires silently.
A special round is loaded into the handle.
This mechanism here is the safety. And this mechanism is the trigger for silent elimination and conducting sabotage behind enemy lines.
The attempt by saboteurs to break through this deep is yet another sign of Putin's plans to reach Sumy, currently unrealistic, they promise in 225.
Who else if not 225?
As long as 225 holds the line, well, it's almost impossible for the enemy to do this, because we've already wiped out a couple of enemy battalions here. Our colleagues from our regiment have already taken back Andrivka, and now they're retaking Oleksivka. They're preparing an incubator there. They're preparing an incubator for death. But as they say, welcome to Ukraine. We're waiting for everyone, and everyone will stay here.
However, heroism at the front line has to be shown where the rear has remained indifferent. In private conversations with journalists, soldiers from various units say they haven't seen any quality fortifications that, over 6 months of the Kursk operation, civilian contractors could have built in the north of Sumy region. Then the soldiers wouldn't have had to shed so much blood and sweat, and there would be fewer lost kilometers on the war map. Andriy Saplienko, Ilya Shinkarenko, Serhiy Profilov, TSN Week, 1+1, Marathon, United News.
And now, another of our war correspondents, Ruslan Yarmoliuk, is joining us live from Donetsk region. And the reason for this live connection is alarming. Ruslan's team was working in Kostiantynivka, and this important logistical hub for our troops is now being shelled by the Russians so intensely that even our colleagues came under fire. They're alive, though concussed. That's what I found out before going on air. I'll ask for more details right now. Ruslan, congratulations. I don't see it yet. I can already see it.
Congratulations.
First of all, how are you as a cameraman? I know there were cuts. How did it happen?
Greetings, Allo. In fact, we are unharmed, thank God, although we still don't understand how it happened that we didn't receive serious injuries, because we were very close to the epicenter of the explosion. We had been working in Kostiantynivka since early morning, filming local residents in different neighborhoods, and decided to move to another location in a private sector, where we wanted to film a church that had been destroyed by a Russian artillery shell. As soon as we parked the car, as soon as we opened the doors, as soon as we set foot on the ground, that's when the first explosion happened. You can actually see what it was like, how it looked right now.
Is everything okay? Are the doors intact?
Seems like you're... Let's get in the car and get the hell out of here. Get in the car, Razik. Come on, come on.
Let's get out. Let's get out.
Actually, we subsequently found out later in the afternoon that during that devastating airstrike, 2 innocent people were tragically killed who were on the very same street as us, just a short distance away. And 1 more person was seriously injured. In reality, the situation with the glide bombs is becoming more and more alarming, because every day several guided aerial bombs hit the city, and they don't choose their targets. They just fall in different neighborhoods, and there are no military targets where they strike. Mostly, it's civilians who are suffering, those who are still in the city.
Reslinchik, thank God you stopped in time and didn't make it to that place. We offer our condolences to the families of all those who died. So, what else did you see in Kostiantynivka? How many people are still left in the city under these shellings? And what are our soldiers saying? Will they be able to hold the city?
Yes, the city is now, let's say, living under constant shelling. There are a lot of destroyed houses, completely ruined. It's hard to say in percentage terms how much has been destroyed and how much has been damaged. What we saw is truly shocking, because we didn't see a single building that was intact. There are still about 9,000 people remaining in the city. And what's more, many of the people we spoke to said they have nowhere to go and no means to leave, so they're left alone with the war. These are mostly pensioners. Also, quite a few people, it's strange, but after spending several years in the rear, they've come back. They say they've run out of money, so they're forced to return to Kostiantynivka. The city goes on with its life, even though it's under constant shelling, and there's practically no electricity or water anywhere. Another reason for the Russian strikes on the city is actually that the city serves as a logistics hub for our military, and the enemy doesn't choose its targets. They just drop bombs on the heads of civilians. Here are the direct words of the press officer of the 24th Separate Mechanized Brigade.
They try to strike at our rear positions, but since they operate without regard for the fact that there are local residents here, these kinds of airstrikes, as we've seen, are prepared in just 5 minutes. So this wasn't aimed at us, it was planned, and obviously they had some targets in mind.
Thank you for joining us, because I understand that after a concussion, it's obviously difficult. We're worried about you. But our viewers know journalists take risks too. May God protect you, our defenders, and the residents of Kostiantynivka. And we're waiting for you in Kiev. TSN war correspondent Ruslin Yarmoliak and his cameraman Mikhailo Putyata. He's behind the scenes right now, reporting from Kostiantynivka in Donetsk region, where today it was truly a miracle that saved them. Despite the fact that Moscow is not inclined to honor any agreements, the prisoner exchange process is still ongoing. This week, severely wounded defenders of Ukraine and the youngest soldiers returned from Russian captivity. One of them had just turned 20. This is already the 8th stage of the 66th prisoner exchange since Istanbul. This particular stage turned out to be one of the most important because it was possible to bring back not only soldiers from the Mariupol garrison, as well as from the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kharkiv, and Kherson directions, but also officers. The Russians released them extremely rarely. Almost for the first time, it was possible to free Ukrainian civilians who had been convicted by local courts from enemy prisons. All of them will receive medical and psychological assistance. Exchanges must continue, President Zelensky emphasized. Our goal is to bring everyone home. And now, let's break down the main diplomatic battle of the week, which put the reputation of the United States in the world on the line. Because right now, President Trump's decision will determine whether America is considered a reliable partner at all, which will, of course, also affect its economy. What is currently known about the suspension of arms deliveries to Ukraine? What are our European partners and we ourselves doing in this situation? And what unexpected danger has caught Russia off guard? TSN correspondent Oksana Kuchenko on the visible and invisible storms of the week.
The news about the suspension of American arms supplies comes to Ukrainians at a less than ideal time. Russia is actively conducting its so-called summer offensive on the front lines, while cities in the rear are experiencing record drone, cruise missile, and ballistic missile attacks.
This is a very bad development for us. I can't imagine what will happen when all the supplies run out completely.
They believe that the US has become an unreliable partner.
The first reports about the suspension of supplies are not coming from official sources, but from anonymous sources in the Western press. The Pentagon has suspended an entire package of military aid, already prepared and packed for shipment in Poland. The reason, supposedly, is to check whether the US Army's own stockpiles have been depleted. There are guided missiles for HIMARS, Hellfire missiles, 155mm shells, and Stingers. But most importantly, dozens of those long-awaited missiles for the Patriot air defense systems. All of this was allocated to Ukraine back when President Biden was still in office. Kiev is, to put it mildly, in shock over the decision, even if they're not showing it. For clarification, the acting U.S. chargé d'affaires in Ukraine, John Hinkle, has been summoned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Ukrainian side requested an urgent conversation with the Americans to find out what exactly had happened. The European allies were no less stunned than Kiev. Bloomberg reports that the White House was asked for an official explanation of such a move, and later for a softening of the position, or even its reversal. Germany immediately got involved in the process. The office of Chancellor Friedrich Merz confirmed that they are holding urgent, intensive negotiations about purchasing Patriot systems for Kiev at their own expense.
Unfortunately, the MT system cannot replace an anti-missile, anti-ballistic complex. So, if we have a smaller number of missiles in reserve, we redistribute them. And in certain civilian objects, well, they just don't make it into the priority list.
The main question hanging in the air is, who made this decision and why? Did Trump really personally give the order to stop aid to Ukraine? At first, the person held responsible for freezing the supplies was a certain director of policy at the Department of Defense, Elbridge Colby. One after another, reports are appearing in the American press about confusion among the top U.S. establishment. For State Department employees, security advisors, and members of Congress, this came as a complete surprise. Both parties began to check whether the delay in supplies violated legislation that requires providing security assistance to Ukraine. Later, American NBC News learned that the decision had been made solely by Pentagon Chief Pete Hegsel. Trump was quick to back up his minister.
We haven't suspended anything at all. We are actively supplying weapons, and indeed, we have already provided a significant amount of weaponry. We are diligently working with them and striving to offer assistance. But you see, President Biden has unfortunately emptied out our entire country by giving them so many weapons. And we absolutely need to make sure we have enough for ourselves.
Meanwhile, conspiracy theories started spreading on social media and among analysts. The halt in aid to Ukraine coincided with Putin's summer offensive on the Ukrainian front, and thus it kind of helped to the Kremlin. Another theory is that the halt in supplies is fulfilling Russia's demands for a ceasefire. Another version is that the scandal around the arms embargo was meant to make it easier for Trump to negotiate appeasement with the aggressor. Moreover, there wasn't just one phone call. For the first time in 3 years, French President Emmanuel Macron called Putin. No miracle happened. The Russian leader made it clear to both of them that he would not back down from his aggressive goals in Ukraine. And to the US president, Putin basically spat in his face, because the air raid alert in Ukraine started while the two leaders were still on the phone. And it was that very night that a record attack on Kiev took place, clearly timed for the United States Independence Day. The head of the White House does not hide his disappointment with the conversation and admits that there has been no progress in the peace talks.
I am very disappointed with today's conversation with President Putin. I'm just saying, I don't think he wants to stop, and that's very bad.
Putin said no and struck Kiev. So now, obviously, Trump has to make a decision, first of all, about resuming, if he was involved in all this, about resuming deliveries, allowing their purchase, and allowing Germany to buy and Ukraine, and Germany to buy additional Patriot systems.
The day after the call with Putin, the Ukrainian president has a personal conversation with Trump. Following the talks, he speaks of a positive shift. But having learned from bitter experience, the Ukrainian team has somewhat changed its approach to the current American administration. So instead of just asking for weapons, they decided to offer money for them and share their own technologies.
Today I spoke with President Trump. It was an important conversation. We agreed that our teams would meet to strengthen air defense capabilities. We discussed joint production in great detail. Both we and the Americans need this.
The Washington publication Axios also reports positive feedback from the conversation. Columnist Barack Ravid, who is familiar with the details of the call, says that Trump expressed a desire to help with air defense and to check exactly what and under what circumstances was suspended by his officials. Later, on the plane during a conversation with journalists, Trump shares that he has already threatened Putin with sanctions.
We talk about sanctions a lot, yeah. You know, we talked a lot about sanctions, and he understands that they can be applied.
Obviously, for Putin, these latest final Chinese warnings from Trump are no longer taken seriously. The Wall Street Journal writes, the Kremlin leader has clearly sensed the weakness of the current American administration, and the lack of response to the shelling is perceived as a signal to intensify attacks. Not to mention how delighted the Kremlin was with the decision to freeze weapons supplies to Ukraine, something it had been seeking since the very beginning of the full-scale invasion. In this way, an unprecedented window of opportunity has opened up for Russia. In fact, this summer, as experts from the Institute for the Study of War note, is almost decisive in the context of the offensive against Ukraine. Both analysts and intelligence services insist it is in 2026 that Russia will begin to feel the effects of economic problems.
Here's the most important thing. We are planning to reduce defense spending next year and the year after that, over the next 3 years. That's our plan.
Of course, no one believes him. Cutting war funding is only possible when Putin runs out of money. Something is just making the dictator say these words, and all of Russia's sworn friends can see it clearly. The boss isn't what he used to be. The Kremlin has started to lose its seemingly eternal influence in the South Caucasus. The raids by Russia's FSB on Azerbaijanis in Ekaterinburg, which resulted in 2 deaths and several injuries, have opened a real Pandora's box. The raids were supposedly carried out in connection with unsolved crimes from more than 15 years ago. Ilham Aliyev's response turned out to be catastrophic for the Putin regime. Baku still hasn't recovered from the outrage over the downing of the Azerbaijan Airlines plane last December. 2 anti-aircraft missiles caused the deaths of 38 passengers at that time. Aliyev didn't even get an apology from Putin. So now Baku has started to respond in kind. The country staged a real show of force, detaining 13 Russian citizens. Searches were also conducted at the office of the propaganda agency Sputnik. According to local media, that's exactly where FSB agents were working. In court, the suspects in drug trafficking and cybercrimes appear with faces that have clearly been beaten. There's no reverence for Moscow's greatness or the inviolability of Russians.
With all due respect to Azerbaijan, its history and traditions, if Russia so much as raises an eyebrow.
The war in Ukraine helped Azerbaijan successfully regain control over Nagorno-Karabakh and resolve its differences with Armenia without Russia's mediation. Baku is gradually taking away Moscow's monopoly on supplying energy resources to Europe. Already, the EU has become Azerbaijan's largest trading partner. And on top of that, Ilham Aliyev has managed to secure significant military support from Turkey. He even negotiated the opening of a massive Turkish military base. And this past weekend, the city of Kankendi hosted a real gathering of Turkic leaders. Joining Aliyev and Erdogan were the Prime Minister of Pakistan, as well as the leaders of Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan.
Moscow is no longer the center people turn to for approval. Now it's just a complicated neighbor, one they might listen to, but no longer fear. All of this is happening against the backdrop of war, isolation, and growing competition for influence in the region. Russia is losing its allies.
Peoples once subordinate to Moscow and Russia's strategic partners on paper are making it clear to Putin they are no longer colonies. And it seems that only Russian television still believes that if Putin just raises an eyebrow, everyone will fall back in line. Oksana Kachenko, TSN, Week 1+1.